there is some default risk component, even in a rupee bond, that pushes up the rate. So when you use that as your risk-free rate, you're embedding in there some default risk that you end up double counting. That's one practice. Here's the other one. You take a 9% equity risk premium for all Indian companies, no matter which Indian company it is, it has a 9% equity risk premium. You know why that's misguided? There I was actually looking at Infosys versus Bajaj Auto versus Bharti Airtel. I mean, with this whole spectrum of companies, they're all Indian companies, right? Do you think they're all equally exposed to Indian country risk? I mean, Infosys gets, what, 3% of its revenues in India? Has an operating base that's incredibly movable with its people. It's a very different risk exposure than Bharti Airtel, which is an Indian company which has managed to expose itself to what, Africa? It's a very different risk exposure. Your risk comes from where you operate, not where you're incorporated, which means compute the equity risk rate for an Indian company. I've got to start with where do you do business and build up from there. I can't just, you're an Indian company, 9% for you. But it offers opportunities for me as an investor. Because if you do that, guess what you're going to do? You're going to consistently underprice companies like Infosys. You're going to consistently overprice companies like Bharti Airtel. So I'm not going to stop you doing what you're doing, and I'll come in and try to take advantage of mispricing. But that's, I think, again, something I want to emphasize. Just because everybody does it doesn't make it right. And there are lots of valuation practices with excuses. Everybody does it. Why are you making such a big deal? I think you still have to make a big deal because something's got to change at some point in time. This practice in particular of attaching equity risk premium based on where a company is incorporated definitely has to change. Yes?
So, have you ever looked at a company like Tata Motors which is trying to gain market share in China and trying to, so basically an Indian company.
Come on, Tata Motors is not gaining market share in China. Jaguar Land Rover is, right? So that was the best decision that Tata Motors ever made in the last 10 years, is buying Jaguar Land Rover. And what made it work was you bought it from a company that had sold it at any cost. That was what made it work. Most acquisitions, let's face it, are bad deals with the acquiring company stockholders. You take Cora Steel, you can take the other, it's not really worked out because you play in a public marketplace, you pay market price plus, by the time you end up paying that premium, it gets so difficult to make your money back. But Tata Motors, Jaguar Land Rover, but that's where the China exposure comes from. It's not that there are a lot of Tata cars on Beijing roads.
From the so how do you value the JLR? Because the stock is going down because of JLR. And we all are struggling as of now because everybody owns the stock. And nobody knows why is it going down. So,
China. They said, if you have to let go of trying to explain prices at some point in time, right? Sometimes you got to say, look, I don't know what's going on. It's a pricing game. The pricing game I've lost control of. And there are times when I've actually walked away from a company where I like the company, I made a lot of money in the company, but I've lost control of the game. One of the examples was actually a blog post that I put up when I sold Apple in April of 2011. I sold it at 600. I put an intrinsic valuation of Apple at that same time, about 650 or 660, which makes no sense. It's selling this because I bought the stock. I got lucky. I bought it in '97 for like $9 per share. And that's the story behind it. I'd love to tell you that an intrinsic valuation in '97. They told me the stock was massively undervalued. You know what I bought it? Because I felt sorry for the company. This was my charitable contribution that year. I had used Apple products forever. In '97, of course, Apple was on the verge of going under, and I felt really sad. I said, you know what? I'm going to make a charitable contribution in the form of 3,000 shares of Apple stock at $9 per share. Best charitable contribution I ever made. That's a $600 for 14 years later. But I said, I'm leaving. The rationale I gave was very simple. I said, I think Apple is still undervalued, but this has become a pricing game. People who are setting prices are doing it in ways I don't understand. And I've got too much of my portfolio in Apple, partly because of its success. It had become almost 30%. I said, I can't afford to play this pricing game because I have no idea how it works. So tomorrow they might drive the price to 900 and I could be happy. They could drive it to 300 and I have no control over the process. I said, I'm leaving. But it's not forever because that momentum did push the stock up to 700. And then almost overnight, the mood shifted. No, as you remember, September of 2011, Apple could do nothing wrong. It was the greatest company in the face. October of 2011, Apple could do nothing right. Every news story, people looking at the bad stuff that came out. The stock kept going down. It got down as low as 380. And about a year and a half ago, when the stock was at probably 4, I'd love to say I bought it at 380, but it was like 430 or 440. I put up a valuation of Apple and I said, no, I'm coming back because the prices are all left. They've lost interest in the stock because it's dropped again. In fact, I closed the story about 4 weeks ago, 128. I said, people are going crazy again. I'm leaving. But guess what? I'll keep coming back. And now basically my job is to make sure that I'm coming in at the right times based on my value judgment. So long answer to the question, I'm saying sometimes when you see things happen in a stock, you cannot explain it by what's going on the ground or what the numbers are telling you. The real answer to the question is mood and momentum. It's pushing the price up to a level that you really can't deal with as an investor. It's what, 41,499 other companies out there. You might not have thought. You might be a self-directed research analyst. This is you're stuck with this bad business. You look at bad companies. You go, which is the least bad company that I can recommend? You've got your job to do it as best as you can. But as an investor, I don't have it.
How do you value management? Because Apple with Steve Jobs, Apple with Tim Cook operates differently.
Does it? How do we know? We try to think of, So what makes, you remember Steve Jobs used to be a CEO of Apple pre-97, right? You know that he didn't really have a good time and there were things that, Steve Jobs between 1990 is the stuff of legend. But I think it's, in fact, one of the most damaging developments ever is how successful Steve Jobs was. Here's why. I call it the Steve Jobs syndrome. Every CEO wants to be Steve Jobs. They want to have a movie made about them. They want to have multiple books. And how do you get to be Steve Jobs? You take a $10 billion company and make it a $700 billion company. It scares the living daylights out of me. Because I'm an investor in Yahoo. Who's the CEO of Yahoo? Marissa Mayer. Very smart, very ambitious woman. That goes without saying because you're a CEO. And she wants to be a star. You know why that scares me? Because where did I say Yahoo's value comes from? A holding in Yahoo Japan and a holding in Alibaba. In fact, when I posted Yahoo, I said, here's my dream vision of Yahoo. That Marissa Mayer will fire everybody in the company, reduce the workforce to 1. She can be the person. Get 2 flat panel displays. I'm willing to splurge. And on one flat panel, you'll have the price of Yahoo Japan. The other flat panel, you'll have the price of Alibaba. And every day she'd come in, watch the prices, and go home. That's the best case scenario for me. Because everything she does otherwise is potentially going to be damaging. And my fear is that if she wants to be Steve Jobs, you know what she's going to try, right? She's going to take gambles, big time gambles. Because if it fails, she can say, it's a bad company, the business is failing, it's not my fault. If it succeeds, it's like a Marissa Mayer story, Marissa Mayer movie, Marissa Mayer books. And that's a scary thought, is when CEOs are trying to be stars. They all want to be the next Steve Jobs. They forget about all those people who tried what Steve Jobs did and failed. Or even that Steve Jobs tried what Steve Jobs did and failed in a previous iteration. So you could argue that what happened between 1999 and 2000 was not just Steve Jobs, but a collection of luck, events playing out, and a competition that really kind of bent over backwards to help do stupid things. So I wouldn't be as, I've said some mean things about Tim Cook, but it's I think he's not. I think Apple's fate would be very different if Steve Jobs had continued to see him. That's my view, but I know that people think that Steve Jobs coming around, there have been 3 more disruptions, that Apple will have the iCar, the iHouse, the whatever, the iAirplane, the iAirline. I think that will work, but it's tough to pull out what happened then. And I think that we expecting it to keep doing what it did is really asking too much. Yes?
Sorry, could you talk about reverse DCF to understand the narrative?
You mean computing an internal rate of return?
No, on the back.
That's what assumptions you need to get to.
And then check it versus the narrative. Is that
You just delayed your day of reckoning or your moment of decision, because let's say you do a reverse DCF and you come up with an implied growth rate of 21%. Now the question I'm asking you is, whether it's a growth. So it doesn't solve anything, right? I'm good friends with Michael Busson, who wrote Expectation Investing, which is all about factoring this out. It doesn't make your life any simpler. It just means that you still have to face the decision. You face it at that end of the spectrum rather than there. And I think there's nothing wrong with it. I'll tell you what I find helpful. Discounted cash flow valuation. One of the problems I've always had is I'm asked to make a point estimate for every year. So you ask me, what's the revenue growth rate? You insist on one number. Give me a number, 8%. Then you ask me, what's the margin? I have to give you one number. You know why that makes me uncomfortable? Because there is a distribution around that number, and I feel this urge to give you the entire distribution. Say, I think the margin is going to be 8%. Oh, by the way, it could be as low as 6 or as high as 10. But in traditional DCF valuation, you can't put that in. You ever done a Monte Carlo simulation? You use crystal ball, you use that risk. That's basically what it allows me to do is when I face uncertainty, I'm going to put it down. I'd rather face up to my uncertainty rather than hide from it. And the output I get will be a distribution of values. And how does that help you? You can come up with a median and use that. You can also use other information. What's the best case? What's the worst case? It's in there. What's the chance I could be wrong? It's in there. So one of the things I find useful increasingly that I use valuation is more probabilistic and statistical techniques, simulations, decision trees. Because it allows me to be a little more honest about the uncertainty I'm facing and be more explicit about how we deal. Your question?
So if in a company you have very different risk profiles, business, for example, within Damodaran you have within JLR. So do you discount the two different cash flows differently or use the same discount rate?
If you wanted value in pieces, you would have to discount them differently. But I'll tell you how it shows up within a company, right? If you're in 3 businesses and 7 countries, there is no one hurdle rate they're going to use to make decisions. It's got to depend on what business you're talking about, what country you're investing in, right? And I think one of the things I kind of emphasize in my corporate finance class is let's stop talking about the cost of capital for the company. It's actually dangerous because then you think, hey, my cost of capital as a company is 9%. So if I make more than 9%, I am making money. It depends on what business you're investing in and what country you chose. So if your business, you took the riskiest of your business and invest in East Africa, guess what? 9% might not be enough. You might need to make 15, 18, 21%. And part of what I try to give as students in corporate finance, if you tell me what business you're investing in, what country you're investing in, I should be able to give you a hurdle rate specific to those 2 choices. And while you're doing this is so complicated. Thank God you're not GE. 26 businesses, 72 countries. Can you imagine what that matrix looks like? Hurdle rates? But that's what happens. I call these octopuses, these companies, because they have tentacles all over, and you're not careful, you're going to get sucked up somewhere along the way. So you have to cut each business out and make your specific choices.
I have a question.
Where's that voice?
Yeah.
Okay, there you go.
Yeah. One big variable in determining and creation of the value is the management. I mean, Orkut could have given the same narrative as Facebook, or Ola can give the same narrative as Uber. How do you account and factor in that which management has the vision, strategy and the execution to actually realize that value?
Okay. At each stage in a company's life cycle, what you need of management is different, right? So you're a founder startup. You know what is going to define success for you is, can you tell a really good story that's plausible and potentially very profitable? It's all about the storytelling. So when you look at young founders, that's what separates the ones who can raise a lot of money. So how good it is. Then you get to the next phase. You got the money, and then I want some more substance. There I'm going to measure you on how consistently you keep telling the story. Because if you keep changing the story, I'm going to lose faith in you. And how consistent are your actions with that story? Then there's the third phase, where we have to start delivering numbers. There I'm going to measure you not just how good a story is, but how do the numbers back up the story. The fourth phase, you're now a mature company. You've got to kind of adapt your narrative to the fact that the reality is that you're a mature company. I'm going to look to see whether your numbers are reflecting your narrative and your narrative reflects your mature company. Then you get into decline. Your strength as a CEO is how well you manage the shrinking of your business. Because I'm not going to measure it with you. I don't want you to grow the business. So the skill set you need to be a good manager actually varies depending on which stage of the life cycle you're in. Now do you see why corporate governance matters? You're a young startup or you're a growth company, you pick a great CEO. This guy's a great guy. I don't care whether I have voting rights. That's okay with them. What happens when the company becomes mature and this guy doesn't have the skill set to be a top manager in a mature company? And most people don't. Let's face it, Elon Musk is a great CEO for Tesla. You make Elon Musk the CEO of GM, it's going to be devastating. The company's going to essentially come apart at the seams. What makes him so successful at Tesla is a great storyteller with a great sense of drama. He drives his Tesla around across the country. I said that proves anything, but he gets a lot of news stories about it. So I'm glad we have the Elon Musks at Tesla and the Travis Kalanick's at Uber because that's what those companies need at this stage of the life cycle. But that doesn't mean I'm going to be okay with them running these companies when they become more mature companies at the start. It's a different skill set. You know when you have to know when as a CEO when it's time to leave. And the problem with many companies is founder CEOs, especially if they've been successful, tend to hang on too long. That's too bad because I think if they left at the right time, not only would they make a lot more money, but they'd have their reputations much more intact than they actually are. So does management matter? Depends on the company. If you're a young startup, I think it matters because it matters if you tell a good story, you stay consistent with that story. And I'll give you the example of this. You look at Amazon. 16, 17 years after it was started up, it still makes no money, right? But markets have been incredibly forgiving. And next time somebody says markets are short-term, ask them this question. How the heck do you explain a company like Amazon, where 16 years after the start, they still don't make money, and markets attach a $350 billion market cap? You know why markets are so forgiving? Because whatever you think about Jeff Bezos, he's told the same story. He's been consistent with the story all the way through. The story is, we're going to make revenues first. Trust us. We'll figure out a way to make money. And because he's been consistent both in what he says and how he acts, markets have been okay with it. Most CEOs don't have that narrative consistency. They keep changing the story. They say, what do I handle this one here? Let me tell them that. That's not the way you build up a company. So top management does matter, especially early in the life cycle. It matters less as you get to the mature phases. Let's face it. Do you think the top management at ExxonMobil makes the slightest difference in value? I really don't even know who runs ExxonMobil, and I don't care. There's a 93% R squared between ExxonMobil's operating income and the oil price. All I have to do is look at the oil price. There's ExxonMobil. The management cares. Doesn't make a difference. There are be surprised how many companies there are where you put an auto manager in there. It's a new African developed auto CEO. But $2,000, our CEO will run your company. Then you can feed in all the right words and CEOs are supposed to use all those buzzwords and make them, the computer sends out memos. The rest of the company doesn't even know that the computer is sending out memos, but they pick all the words and send out. Sounds like a really great CEO. Inspirational language, positive thinking, you can pull from all of that. But a lot of companies, you can turn on to auto CEOs, it's not going to make a difference in that. But for some companies, obviously, it does. Yes?
How do you think about interest rates and the environment and whether they're all policy or not?
Macro guy, I try not to think about things I can't control. I take a very carbon view on these things. It is what it is. Worrying about it is not going to change it. And I think we assign too much power to central banks. We think that, I told the story this morning in my valuation seminar. I said, but 6 months ago I was at the Federal Reserve with my daughter and with my son, my daughter, and my wife. We went to the Federal Reserve tour. You actually visit the building and they take you on a tour of the building. They show you the mint and they show you the big stacks of cash, which is the most exciting part. persona non grata with my family. Because when the tour started, there was this tour guide, she's like 22-year-old, very smart, very bright person. And I almost asked her, can you take me to the interest rate room? So I've been reading all these stories about Janet Yellen setting interest rates. I was convinced there's this room where she comes in the morning, there's a lever she moves. T-bond rates go to 3% tomorrow. T-bill rates go to 0.5%. And the point I'm trying to make is, what's the only rate the Fed controls? The Fed funds rate. I don't know about you, but I've never borrowed at the Fed funds rate. I don't know anybody who has. It's an interbank rate. They don't control T-bill rates. You see, but how do you explain why rates have been low for the last 5 years? On my website, there's a graph that actually graphs out the T-bond rate against what I call an intrinsic interest rate. And here's what I do. I take the inflation rate each year, I take the real growth each year, I add the two numbers up, and I plot that graph. Take a look at that graph. It's amazing how highly correlated the T-bond rate is to inflation plus real growth. So why have interest rates been low for the last 5 years? Because inflation has been low and growth has been abysmal. Low plus abysmal gives you low. The Fed had an effect, sure, it's a margin, 20 basis points maybe. I'm not going to lie awake and say, what's Janet Yellen thinking right now? What about right now? What about right now? It's really, I think, it's been both a distraction and an excuse for analysts who really don't want to do their work. It's the Fed's fault. That's why we didn't make money last night. It's the Fed's fault. Stop talking about the Fed and start doing your job. Okay? And I think that unfortunately there's this notion that because the Fed sets rates that they can come and bail you out if you do stupid things and inflation is high, they can just lower the rates for you. So I'm not going to lie awake at night and say, what happens if interest rates go up or down? If interest rates go up, they're going to go up for a reason. It's either going to be because inflation gets higher or real growth gets higher. My valuations are going to change. It's not just my discount rate that's going to change, right? My cash flows are going to be different. I don't even know what the net effect of value would be of higher rates if I bring in all those other changes into the process.
I think we can go on forever, but it's time to have a terminal value to this session. Liquidation value, yes. The liquidation value is the liquid counter right there. So, thank you, Aswath, so much. It's a brilliant session. We could go on forever. I'm sure people have a lot of questions. But it's been a long day for you, and we're so glad you're here with us. Interesting insight. I think we got covered a wide range of subjects in a short period of time. Pradeep ji, if I can request you to give a small token to Aswath. And we're very glad if you join us for dinner and drinks. Thank you.